Thank you for coming out tonight. Is this on? You can hear me? I can't tell. All right. We have with us the producers and producer/co-writer of Bel Canto, Caroline Barron and Anthony Weintraub. You guys pass the water down. Now's the time, just in case. So this is a really beautiful film. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's really, I probably speak for everyone in here that it really speaks to our basic humanity, right? The fascinating, tense moments that turn into really interesting moments, intimate moments between real people. So I'm curious where the impetus came to. Obviously, it's based on a novel, right? It's based on Ann Patchett's bestseller. What was the impetus to get the book, and how did it start?
So I was, thank you all for coming, by the way. Speaking of humanity, there's an article in the New York Times that I just saw, I don't know if anyone saw it, that's from today's paper, or it's the online edition, about how 2017 was the worst year for humanity. Did you see that?
The worst year?
Worst year for humanity.
That's exciting.
All right. It's interesting.
It's great to be human.
Was that a sliding scale, or was that just...
Who's rating this?
Yeah, it's a weird, I don't know. Not a great year, but...
Anyway, so I read the book in 2001, not too long after 9/11, and was given the book by a friend who also introduced me to a man who became my husband.
Cheers to that. That was a good year.
Big year for humanity, big year.
Big year for humanity. And the fact that we're still together almost 17 years later after the time it took to make this film and have 2 kids is, pretty good.
True testament to love.
So I was particularly drawn to the story in the book, probably beyond the fact that it was such a beautiful story and it was about humanity and sort of shines a light on the things in us that are common, that we share. I had founded a humanitarian aid organization in 1999 called Film Aid International, which uses film and video to educate, entertain, and inform refugees and displaced people around the world. And I founded it for the refugees from Kosovo in '99. And it was all about using film to bring people together, and how film and art and music transcends politics and cultural barriers and language. And the book just was such a parallel to me of everything that I had experienced working with refugees in refugee camps, and that I felt like I had to make it into a movie. And then we started dating around the same time that I was reading the book, and really started working together shortly after, and it became obvious that we should partner and that Anthony should adapt it.
Yeah, and I just really, I really responded to the book. Was just a beautiful, as Caroline said. I mean, the themes mainly, as you said, about human connection and sort of being civil. That there are choices we can make as humans, and we can go to that base barbarism, or we can meet each other, I guess. And that's just really an amazing theme of the book, and just very strong. But I also just related to it as a great yarn, that it's very well told. It kind of jumps off the page. How many people in here have read the book? So it's a great read, and it really, I kind of hate to say this as a filmmaker, but it's hard to turn off that side of yourself when I read literature. And often I think to myself, this would make a great film, or this wouldn't. And that this book really did lend itself, particularly, I thought, to cinema. It's a great thriller, but it has incredible characters that are very rich and dynamic. And so it was quite not only a challenge to adapt it, but like a really cool, fun challenge. And then the technical aspects of it are also quite cinematic. There's obviously a lot of music in the piece, and music is a sort of another character, as is the use of language. And we took that position early on that we were going to try to at least use many languages or try to tell the story not silently, but without depending on sort of the English way to do it, which is either faking that these guys can speak English or using a lot of subtitles. So I think you notice there was a mix of different ways, different strategies we used.
So can you talk about the process of the development process? Let's stick with that for a minute. In terms of the rights to the book, when did you start writing? How long did it take to get to the point where you were really ready to go make this thing? Did you start writing before you had the rights, or how did it go?
No, so it's a long story.
We got time.
So the short version of the story is that when I read the book, I reached out to Ann Patchett's representatives, and she was not interested in optioning the book at all. And I tried to pursue it, and it was just no, she wasn't optioning the book. And I guess a couple of months after that, she was speaking with Renee Fleming in Lincoln Center. Anthony's like my memory, because I'm always forgetting exactly where these things happen. And I was they were doing an interview at NPR. I was running, and I was listening to them, and I texted Anthony, who was in Tokyo, and I said, Ann Patchett and Renee Fleming are going to be at Lincoln Center tonight. And he was like, you're going, and you're going to introduce yourself to her. And I was like, okay. So I did that, and explained who I was, and then she said that she would have breakfast with me the next day. So, and then there was a process of getting the rights. Renee Fleming actually was involved with the project at that point, sort of in a, not in like a contractual way, but she really wanted to make it into a movie as well. And so I met with Renee, kind of got her blessing that I could do it. And then we just went through a whole series of directors and of false starts and encouraging starts. And I'm
actually before the script.
I'm actually 28. I know I might not. This movie
wow,
has
you started
aged
when you
me
were 11?
so much. But we have these wonderful friends from Italy, and they were friends with Bernardo Bertolucci, and they're like, look, call Bernardo. I was like, fantastic. They called Bernardo. Next thing Bernardo wanted to do it, and then we were off to Italy. And that was like a couple of years, and that didn't work out. And there's a long road littered with amazing filmmakers on the path to today, and for whatever reasons, each one has each director has a different story along with the challenge, and unfortunately, Anthony, or fortunately, wrote a script with each one pretty much. So he traveled a lot. And
so how did you guys come to Paul Weitz, who, by the way, if you don't know, is the guy who made American Pie with his brother? And
wouldn't you choose him for this?
What's that?
He would be on the top
like
of anyone's list,
choice.
Wouldn't he? I went to college with Paul, but then only recently in the last several years, I don't know if it was connected to that, but Caroline started working with him and had produced 2 of his last films, Admission and Being Flynn. And, Paul's being able to watch him and work with him and knowing him is just seemed like the ultimate guy. I mean, a great guy to work with, but also a total human, someone who understands cinema, but really also is... I would say that he's really in touch with a lot of these themes, the human connections between these characters, and the ability to elicit that from actors is probably one of his great strengths. I don't think anyone would start a description of his cinema with the mise en scène, for example. They would talk about how he can draw out performances from a lot of different kinds of actors and draw a through line through a movie, and that seemed really perfect for this movie. This going back to the trajectory, though, I think, what Caroline was describing is the story of independent film. And it's really interesting to look at that over these 17 years. Because if you really took Bel Canto now and you said, I want to make a movie of it, a bunch of militants take over a house and there's an opera singer in there, I think you'd still get the same response from the big studios, which is that this is not really our thing. Many of them are not even making much literary material anymore, but it might go to a Netflix or onto a streaming service. And when we started this, those didn't even exist. So I think there is a story there about the trajectory, and so it has there's kind of the vagaries of the business reasons, and then there's everything else, the nitty gritty and the obstacles that all filmmakers have to come up against.
And so bringing it to the next potentially obvious stage, was it Julianne Moore's involvement that finally got it going, or was it going and then you brought her on?
Yeah, so basically, after I produced Capote,
Just keep going.
and Anthony and I were like,
Yes.
we are so hot. we are so successful. I can't believe
We've
it.
got a best picture.
And we're going to be rich. Anyway, so we started optioning projects and set them up at various places, and nothing got made. And so it was like, oh my God, we don't have any money. So I have to line produce again. So then nobody would hire me as a line producer because I was a creative producer. And then I ended up getting hired to line produce Being Flynn, which coincidentally Paul and Anthony had gone to college together, and so we had this nice connection. And then after that, I said, we talked about it, let's give it to Paul. Like we saw something in him, especially through that film, which was such a departure from his other films. And so then he didn't read it. He didn't read the script, I think, for like a year. I'm pretty sure.
That could be true.
And then he got admission, and he said, would you do admission? I said, okay, are you going to read Bel Canto? And then he finally read it. He's like, I really like it. I really like the script, and now I want to read the book. It's like,
It's
okay.
amazing how hard it is to get people just to do what
Right.
is
So-
partially your job,
Yeah, I
which is
mean,
to read.
there's some of the things about the way the business works. You often go to a director and you give them an exclusive, let's say, for them. They'll be able to read it and make a decision. Some producers don't do that. Some do. We
felt we had to do that with Paul.
and especially with somebody.
Anyway, so then he finally read it. He wanted to do it. Then he was like, okay. So then he wanted to read the book, and then he got Mozart in the Jungle. He said, would you do that? I was like, yes, but are we going to make Bel Canto? Anyway, so that added a bunch of years to the whole process. But we learned a lot about music, so that was
Yes, in
really
the
helpful.
process, right,
It was
okay.
actually.
Actually,
I forgot.
So
what
that
you
wasn't on
asked me.
purpose, though. That's just a
the question
happy
was about
coincidence.
Julie, and
Oh.
Julie.
Well,
Paul had a previous relationship with her. She was in Being Flynn in a small role, and he said, I think I should send it to Julie, and we said, that sounds great. And she just read it and said she'd do it. So
But in 24 hours.
yeah, and
So it was like 16 years
honestly,
at that point, or something, 15 years, and it's like 24 hours later, she's like, she wants to do it.
and that was a dynamic that changed things in a financial way, as you can imagine. Getting someone like Julie to do a movie is somewhat of a game changer, and it
But
put
when
us
you
on
say
a
financial, I think people think that suddenly we got all this money.
well. No, the financing was definitely
To
gotta be
make
clear.
the movie.
easier.
Yes. Do you mean he didn't just take the money and run, is what you're saying?
No.
What were you thinking? All right, so let's talk about the script a little bit more, because I'm curious how, having not read the book, if there was a big jump between book and adaptation, and by the way, the fact that that the book is based on an actual event.
Inspired by.
How much did you ignore the actual event? Did you try and stick to the book as much as possible? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, kind of both. I mean, I'm a big researcher writer, so I can't stay away from things. If somebody tells me something's inspired by an actual event, I've got to go digging, and it helps obviously to. What I love is like firsthand accounts and things like that, because it gets you inside of the people involved. So, you know, I'd say yes and no. I mean, you're learning a lot about us here tonight. And one of our MOs is that if we're going to option a piece of material, we probably like it. And so we're probably not going to then go set a movie which is in an unnamed South American country on the moon. And that's an exaggeration, but we're probably not going to try to transform the piece of material unless it really calls for that. And in this case, as I was saying earlier, the book really does play out although it lasts a long period of time in the book, and there's a lot of internal thinking in the book, it does really work well as a story on its own. So the answer is kind of both, in the sense that we really wanted to be true to the book and try as hard as we could to keep a lot of the important scenes, the scenes that we thought were the most vital to the story in it, and the characters as well. So there's not a lot of editing in that respect, but there is certainly huge jumps that were taken, mostly around the condensation of time. Time's a really important element in the book, and obviously it has to play out a lot differently in a scope of 2 hours. I eliminated the ending of the book, which, if any of you remember, was a little... Don't say it.
They might want to read
They
the
might
book.
want to
Yeah,
read
that's
it.
true.
Okay. Anyway, it's very different ending. There are
job,
other
good catch.
things that are different, including some smaller things like the death of the accompanist, and et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of those play out as cinematic choices.
Right. Okay.
So,
And interestingly, some of the directors that you worked with, early on, were drawn initially into the idea of the project, and then when they realized it was based loosely on inspired by this real event, they got more interested in the real event, and they couldn't do.
yeah, that was fascinating
Yeah.
because many of them read the script first, and then it was a trickle-down thing where they read the book, and then they wanted to. One of the elements in the book, to some extent, it plays almost like a fantasy, and you can get inside the characters' minds, and you really understand about the things that are dreaming or things that they're imagining, and you really can't do that in cinema unless you're going to commit to using flashback or using some kind of other strategy, and we didn't want to do that. So it was very hard once we got into the reality of making a film about militants taking over a house to start getting into fantasy and to some extent comedy. There is some comedy in the piece, but not as much as in the book. So that the tone, I think, changed.
So now it's the South American, the unnamed South American or imaginary South American country was shot in...
Yonkers.
Yes, of course.
All the interiors.
Totally. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what I think of when I think of an unnamed...
Remember we were talking about independent
That's a
film?
laugh every time.
Yes, Yonkers. And so let's talk to us about the casting so many international actors. How did that go?
How many of you were in the movie? I heard that's about.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
Hi, guys.
Nice.
Right on. Thank you. Stand up if you were in the movie. Stand up. Please stand up.
Yeah. Nice.
Oh my God! Hi, guys.
Yeah. I recognize you guys.
Very good.
How great. Thank you for your contributions.
And I hope none of you were shot.
So,
yeah.
a couple of funny things. One beautiful thing. We shot it in a place called Alder Manor in Yonkers. And it was a miracle that we found this place. And we sort of found it on various websites. And then I have a brother who lives near there who is involved with the charity that knows the people that own the place. Anyway, when I reached out to them, I said we wanted to take it over for 2 months. And they were like, that's a lot. And I said, and we have no money, So then they said, write a letter to the owner. So I did. And then I heard back from the manager. She said, the owner wants to talk to you directly. I was like, okay. And her name is Leela Gorin, and she is a real estate developer, and she bought the property. Well, first of all, it turns out Bel Canto was her favorite book ever. So she just couldn't even believe that we were, reaching out to shoot it there. And then she told me that she bought the property because she believed that it would be a place where peace was negotiated.
What? Wow.
So it was just like this beautiful thing, and so it was just a beautiful, I keep saying that, but nice situation with her and karmically.
So it's like the Geneva of Yonkers, or
Right,
the
exactly.
Geneva, New Jersey.
We also shot for a week
Exactly.
in Mexico, exteriors.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So the magic of cinema. There's only a few times where we can sort of show that or have used visual effects. You might remember a shot when she sings outside that begins in the room where the French ambassador is playing piano, and then it tracks outside and up to her, and those are two separate locations joined together by wonderful special effects artists. But we didn't have the budget of Marvel, so we couldn't do a lot of that. There's a lot of background stuff that was changed, but
We have 2 cameos in the movie. I'm sure you saw them. We are in the body bags.
Oh, you are. Good for you.
I was like, Paul, I said, listen, they don't look real. I said, if you want us to, we'll get in.
Yeah. Taking one for the team.
We got
Very
in,
good.
zipped up.
All right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
back to the question.
You had to
So
tell
what
them.
about casting internationally?
Oh,
Yeah.
that was. I mean, I think the cast was just superb.
Yeah.
Background was amazing. No, seriously. I mean, I think that we lucked out.
But were you casting? Were the people mostly in the United States, or were you having to?
No, we
pick and-
actually. Tenoch, who plays Benjamin, is from Mexico. His sort of right-hand man, Alfredo, is also from Mexico, Noe Hernandez. And Maria, who plays Carmen, is from Guatemala. And
she was kind of a discovery
Yeah.
in a sense, and sort of late in the game. A good friend of mine who I've written for and worked with is a director in Japan, and he had seen a film, her only film that she was in, called Ixcanol, and it won some awards internationally. And it's quite amazing in the sense that it feels almost like a documentary. And she's incredible in it. And Paul saw it and was just pretty blown away. So we didn't actually, I think he did read her. I think she did
put
a
herself on
self-tape.
tape.
Self-tape.
Right. So were you traveling, or was it all like people
Aside
sending
from that, it
tapes
was
and saying,
People sending tapes.
tapes. I mean, then we had people like Christopher Lambert, who was kind of a great, just not a find, obviously, but this is a guy who everyone remembers as a
The
superstar.
rediscovery.
And he's done some stuff over the years, and spent a lot of time just living and being a Frenchman. And he
and then Elsa
jumped at the
Zilberstein,
chance.
also from France, and Sebastian Koch from Germany. And we were bringing everybody in just after Trump was elected, and at the beginning of January when the whole travel ban was happening. So we had to get some help from Senator Schumer's office to get people in, because it was really, everything was being delayed, especially from people from Mexico and Guatemala. It was really hard. So.
And we had incredible help from our great casting director, A.V. Kaufman, and she really
You're in
did.
the right crowd for throwing.
Yes,
Yeah.
we love AV.
Avie's the
casting
best,
director,
and she really, brought in some incredible people, many of whom play the rebels, and they are not necessarily. Some of them are pure English speakers and grew up in
Yeah.
L.A. or other
Some of them
places.
don't speak Spanish, but it appears that they do. Like Caesar
Great.
is.
Caesar, who happens to be an opera singer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
So that-
And
that was
Maria
kind of
doesn't
amazing.
speak Spanish very well. She speaks Quechua. So one of the another incredible thing about the making of the film and how it sort of reflected the story was just the international cast and how people were translating for each other on set. I don't know if you guys remember that, but like for Maria especially, she didn't really understand always what the director was telling her. So she had an interpreter, and then the other actors were interpreting his direction for her.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Oh, so we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about our Japanese contingent, which is near and dear to me. I wrote 2 anime films, and I've spent a lot of time in Japan. And Ken actually has been kind of a friend to the project for a number of years. I think beyond most of the sort of leads, if there are leads in this, he was really the one to sort of stand by us, and we'd send him news and he'd say, yeah, I still would love to do that. And so that was awesome. And then casting Gen, the interpreter, was just a lot of fun because we got to see a lot of we had a sort of casting team in Tokyo, and Ryo Kase is probably, of that age group, one of the great Japanese actors. He's been in quite a few films.
He was
Clint
incredible.
Eastwood film, which Flags of Our Fathers.
He learned several languages to play that role. Yeah,
that's great. Wow. And can you speak briefly about Julianne's performance? And I mean, it's a risk to have her playing an opera singer, obviously, and actually seeing her doing the numbers. How did you? Was there a rehearsal time? How much of that? Like how?
Well, she's, as everyone I'm sure knows, she's an incredible, professional, and she's like, she studies and she works, and she spent time with Renee Fleming, who did the voice and was incredibly generous in every way. And she worked with Renee's vocal coach, and she studied very hard. She worked and watched Renee perform, watched Renee rehearse, watched videos of her, and
they talked about the life too,
yeah,
a lot. What is it to be? I mean, Renee's one of the hardest working women in show business. I mean, she is constantly traveling, and when you have a voice like that, it's challenging to use it in the way that she uses it. So that factors into how you conduct your life, especially when you're touring, and so that was a factor.
Renee's voice, correct?
It's Renee's voice.
Yeah.
So and when Julianne, she was singing on set, though, correct?
Yes, she was singing.
Yeah.
She made us turn up the music loud.
So that nobody could hear.
Well, I mean,
She's like, turn it up.
Yeah.
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 So that was pretty amazing to see, and to then work with the sync and have it come off.
Yeah,
was one of the big challenges.
Yeah.
Technically.
All right. So what? Tell us when it opens. What you want everybody to do? How they can see it, and tell their friends to see it.
Well, hopefully you liked it, and please tell you. So it's opening. One other thing that's happened in independent film is the film got a very, very small distribution. So we have. It was only going to be what's called day and date, which is opening in the theaters and online at the same time. And we got them to give us at least 1 week of an exclusive theatrical release in New York and LA. So this weekend, on Friday, it opens. It's in one theater in New York. It's at the Sinopolis Theater on 23rd Street. Anthony and I are probably going to do, you're so sick of us already, but we're probably going to do some Q&As there. And it might only be in theaters for a week. And then it will be available online.
It will be available everywhere.
Do you know where it'll be available online?
Which is true. It's going to be on,
Yeah.
it's already pre-order. You could pre-order it on iTunes. So if you have an Apple TV, then on the 21st, which is 1 week later, it will be available in a lot of places. Right. Video on demand, all the services are picking it up. It will probably be on Amazon, and then you're dealing with other tiers that we don't need to go into. Yeah. But what we would love is just if you would tell people, and you can go online and find it. It's not hard. It's the distributor is Screen Media. We have our own little website. It has the complete list. It will go to approximately 20 to 25 cities as of the 21st or the 28th as well, theatrically. So if you know people in any of those places, a showing theatrically is incredible. Like, it still does make a difference, even though they consider theatrical one big advertisement now.
It's belcanto.film is the website.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and
thank you.
everyone for coming
Thanks,
out.
everybody.
Thank you.